On today's show, the fallout continues from the NBA draft. Justin is alongside me to continue to break down the guys that the Bucks selected. A few names to continue to work through. We heard from Jon Horst very late last night as we were recording the podcast, so we'll discuss that a little bit. We have to have the Brook Lopez conversation because there was a little tidbit on the broadcast about a team that might be chasing him. Also, the Summer League schedule's out. I'm sure everyone right now, knowing the names, is excited about Summer League, so let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and also find my work over at ESPN and alongside me from the Bucks Radio Network, Justin Garcia, for today's show. That is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed there at Game Time. And we thank everyone for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every weekday. Plenty of people tuned into the immediate post-draft reaction show. There's been some interesting comments. Some people like to be glass half full. They're excited about the athletes the Bucks have drafted. Others are a little more pessimistic about pick 36, pick 58, and a two-way guy. But I like to be a little bit more optimistic. But we appreciate the feedback either way. Drop a like, a comment, subscribe, wherever you listen to the podcast, whether it's on YouTube or the audio platform. It's free to do, and it really helps us. Justin, I'm going to get to your draft thoughts in just a second, but I don't think that we have a lot to talk about when it comes to Summer League just yet, but the schedule might interest some people. So July 7, it all tips off for the Bucks against the Denver Nuggets at 4 p.m. Central Time. Then the next day, they're playing the Phoenix Suns. A couple of days off, they'll play the Nets, and then they've got the Miami Heat for a little bit of postseason revenge there in Las Vegas, July style. So anyway, the Summer League schedule has dropped, and it does tell us that we are 2 weeks away from potentially seeing some of these young players, young athletes that the Bucks drafted. What did you take away as you were watching this draft and saw these names drop? Because I've got no shame in saying that you definitely watch a little more college basketball than me. So maybe you had taken note of these guys.
Very limited more college basketball than you. It's not so I'm a draft expert, and it's primarily the Pac-12 that I focus in on with my team of interest. But what stood out to me with not only the two draft picks, but the two undrafted signees that the Bucks made as well was, and Jon Horst mentioned this very early this morning, past midnight when he had his media availability, is I forget how he worded it, but the style and the player that the Bucks were targeting and bringing in here, that has changed. And I think that is very apparent when you look at the traits of these players selected by the Bucks. I think the big things that stood out for I'll just speak to the two draft picks with Andre Jackson, especially, is physicality, rebounding, and defense. And I think the common trait here is everybody that the Bucks were bringing in, whether it was Andre Jackson, Amari Moore as well, that two-way contract. You were bringing in guys that were either very good individual defenders or at least capable defenders, and guys that could handle the ball, play make a little more. But the one thing that stood out with a few of them, shooting wasn't there yet. And look, shooting of everything, you can coach that, you can develop that. You cannot develop somebody to grow 3 inches or to get a larger wingspan or become a bigger, but you can develop and work on shooting. I know that's what everybody will point to. I still have a little pause when we talk about it of not being there, because we've seen it a lot. And, you know, it's going to be tough to find some playing time, especially alongside a guy like Giannis, if that is a major flaw. But it's still very young guys that have a chance to work on it. And everything else, especially with Andre Jackson, that you've seen in the highlights and that you've heard about and read about, that's all stuff that is really what the Bucks have coveted most. And I think we've all mentioned this. They seemed to have brought in a lot of guys that are versatile, athletic, and have size on the wing, which is really everything they have lacked for the last 2 or 3 years.
I like my Milwaukee Bucks players relatable, Justin. So we know in the age profile, they're starting to get around my mix. I still feel like I'm younger than a few of these guys, but the fact they can't shoot also makes me feel very comfortable. So you mentioned the Bucks with the pace. So they rated 10th in pace this year, and that's a bit of a funny stat. It's not perfect, whatever. But I think with Giannis, for the most part, we've all had the understanding that if you can get out in transition as much as possible, that's going to maximize an absolute weapon that you've got in Giannis. So last night we looked at the positives and we said, well, this could be just really fun with all these guys and Beauchamp, who you hopefully see a little bit more of this year. You feel like these are the types of guys or the types of skill sets that Giannis is going to have fun with, guys that want to get out in transition, guys that play above the rim. So here's the question that I've got for you, though, because if you don't want to be glass half full and you want to think about the other side, how many guys can you have on the floor that can't shoot with Giannis?
Well, technically, you can have 4 on the floor with him, but
and win games. But the half court offense. I mean, we've spoken about it a lot.
Yeah, your offensive rating is really going to struggle, and it puts a big onus on guys like MarJon, who we saw, I think, develop a little faster or a little more offensively than we anticipated. Not to say that MarJon Beauchamp was a knockdown shooter, but the shot was better than we were led to believe or had seen prior to Summer League in the limited glimpses. I don't want to make it sound like it was, whoa, he was a revelation, but still that was encouraging what we saw. So you would certainly hope that continues to improve. And I think with a guy like Chris Livingston, especially, who, look, it's easy to see why you would be drawn to him. The pedigree that he had, one of the top high school players going into Kentucky, and it just didn't work out. We saw that with a couple of guys in this draft that were, top 10 rated prospects going into college that slid quite a ways down in this draft. But with Livingston especially, the defense is what you really envision. And I think if this roster stays as is with minor tinkering, I think it's easy to look at Drew Holiday and say, man, we would love you to learn behind this guy with his individual defensive traits. He uses his size and is a physical scorer. The rest of it is mid-range and outside. We may have to completely retool that jump shot, but with those things that he excels at, there is no one better to learn from than Drew Holiday. And I think the other part is, we've talked about shooting a lot. It's important to have that spacing. But as we've talked in the past, things are going to be different with this team, if for no other reason than Adrian Griffin. I think a lot of times we focused on the defense, in that we knew the system that Bud was going to run. They were going to switch a little bit and do some different things, but for the most part, they're going to run that drop defense and utilize Brook Lopez's strengths there. We know that's going to be a little different with the way that Adrian Griffin talked at his introductory press conference, but offense is going to be the same thing, where I think the days of let it fly are in the past. And that's not to say the Bucks aren't going to take a lot of 3-pointers, but I think the offensive profile that you look at for this team is going to be different as well. And that may be something like some of the common complaints that you had heard in the past of, man, why doesn't Drew utilize his size more and score in the post a little more? I know Giannis takes some of that away, but some of those things we may see change as well. And while it's not going to help out your spacing, it may, in fact, help out the offense overall.
Okay, so that's perfect, because we did hear from Bucks GM Jon Horst last night. I've got a quote from him from this story in The Athletic from a good friend, Eric Naiman. I want to just read one little quote from that regarding the idea, and certainly what they've publicly said, that the Bucks are going to have to play a little bit different. I think everyone would like to see that, not only because we've seen the last 5 years. We think things are going to freshen up a little bit. And if they're changing the type of personnel they're looking to bring into this roster, they might need to do so as well. Then we're going to get to Brook Lopez, of course, towards the back end of this show. So don't forget to miss that, because I think it's an interesting conversation. But first, let's talk about our friends over at Bird Dogs, because it is hot in Milwaukee right now. And that means it is shorts weather. And Bird Dogs simply make you look good. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look, which is exactly what I'm after. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton and just straight up aren't comfortable. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice any of the movement you need, because you can be wearing the Bird Dogs, whether it's going to Summerfest this weekend, going for a run, going on a date, going out for dinner, because they look good as well, which is the main point here. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We can promise you that. All right, so I mentioned Jon Horst and some of the comments he mentioned, and a lot of this was around, obviously, the type of players that they drafted, but also comments that Adrian Griffin has made over the last few weeks regarding this roster and what might change. Because if you listen to the introductory press conference, that's the easiest question to ask. What are you going to do with Giannis, and how is this team going to differ from what we've seen in the last few seasons? So this is just one quote here. This is from Jon Horst, and he's talking about Adrian Griffin. So he said, he came in when we had a press conference a couple of weeks ago now, really talking about energy and effort and defensive versatility and being able to close out and switch and challenge and things like that. I don't think it's a mistake that you see what we tried to do in the draft, and we're going to try to bring people in our system and grow them in our system with our new coach and the way that we want to play. He's as excited as I am about those guys. So, yeah, that's interesting. That focus more on the defense. I've said it before. I'm not overly worried about the defense on this team as long as you have Giannis, Drew Holiday, and Brook Lopez. We'll get to that. But, adding athletes does make sense. Adrian Griffin spoke about being a little more aggressive, and certainly those things you talk about, attacking the ball handler, trying to look for turnovers, on the other end, attacking the offensive glass. Certainly the way he's at least talking, and I don't know how it works, and I don't know how prominent the role of these young guys is going to be, but it sounds like a fun style of basketball. It sounds like he wants to utilize the strengths of these guys and play super aggressive basketball on both ends of the floor.
It does. And look, it sounded like a fun style of basketball as well when Bud came from or came and brought in his system, that it was something different, where we talked about the Bucks offense, certainly maybe being a little bit archaic before Bud's arrival. And defensively, it seemed to be a little more smoke and mirrors. So seeing something more consistent and stable was certainly fun as well. But we've reached that point now where this team is a championship team and a championship caliber team that, we've talked about it for going on 3 years. It seems like the offense and trying to really juice that up here. I'm with you. I don't have any concerns about the defense, and that's especially given if this core comes back with Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton, and you have those four guys for sure in your starting five. I have no concerns about the defense, especially with some of these names added in what they may be able to give you in small sample sizes. It's just, how do we maximize this offense? Because it's been year after year, and the old refrain of the definition of insanity. We've gone into the playoffs every single year thinking, well, this is the year. This is the year things will be different with this offense. This is the year this group is going to hit the open shots. We're going to see three-point shooting improve. And it just never happened year by year by year. They won that title in 2021 because they had an elite defense in spite of a horrendously bad half-court offense. So something has to change there. I don't think it has to be personnel. So everything we heard in that quote from Jon Horst and everything you've started to kind of get a sense of, I think they're going to focus on this. And I think they're going to look for different ways to score. Not to say they're going to eliminate three-point shots, but it's not just, hey, if you're open, shoot it. Let's work for better shots, and let's be more efficient, and let's use some of the strengths of the individual components of this offense. To me, is what you're most excited about, to see what this new look offense will be under Adrian Griffin.
Well, one thing you can't do offensively if you've got multiple guys on the floor that can't shoot is you can't just have Giannis at the top and four guys standing around, because that's just not going to work. We've seen a little bit of that when the Bucks have struggled. So for all those Bucks fans that are out there and saying, okay, well, are you using Giannis in a different way? Have you got more guys moving off the ball? They're kind of going to have to, depending on which way they go. Obviously, they're still going to have a number of shooters on this roster, but that's what interests me there with the offensive stuff, as you've discussed as well. A couple of thoughts that I just wanted to throw at you, and I don't even know if I'm really asking a question, but I'm just curious what you think. So as I was going to sleep last night after we finished the podcast, and I was thinking about Andre Jackson Jr. and what he could do on the Milwaukee Bucks. I was curious about second rounders and the types of guys you try and take. And I don't know, maybe this is me talking myself into it, which I like to do, but I think there's something cool or something that can be productive about bringing in a guy at that stage in the draft that has been on a really successful team. Jon Horst spoke a lot about him being a winner. And in some ways, it's why I liked Donte DiVincenzo a few years back, that yes, you're bringing in a guy that's been on a winning team, but he was a role player on that winning team. And so he's comfortable with the idea of being a role player. He's not going to come in and have to learn how to do the little things and how to learn how to fit in next to stars, because he's done that in the past. And then when it came to Chris Livingston, it was just the idea of, well, if you've told him not to go work out with other teams, we were discussing the idea of two ways and what does he fit. I don't know. It doesn't seem to me that Chris Livingston would have said, no. And his people would have said, no. Well, let's just save him for pick 58 to Milwaukee if he was going to be a two-way guy. So it seems that there is a plan with these two guys, and who knows if it works out. But the idea that two guys that haven't necessarily been stars but have been impact players on big programs, winning programs, maybe that kind of mindset helps.
Yeah. So for the last one, for Chris Livingston, I kind of thought, and I saw some initial thoughts that, well, it kind of feels like a two-way, but I'm with you that I didn't get that impression for the reason you mentioned. And also, I mean, if we go back to 2 years ago when the Bucks did win the title, I know that was out of necessity, but they rounded out the roster with those second-round picks because it's cheaper. And
right.
You do have to wonder about some of the names that are free agents, that are veteran guys, that it's not as though they're going to be expensive to retain, but they're going to cost more than these second round picks to put on your roster. And again, with a team in the position the Bucks expect to be in with their cap, assuming those other two free agents are back, every dollar counts. And whatever you can do to shave some of that, I know the cap projections coming in a little higher helps the Bucks. If Chris Middleton takes a little less annually, and if Brook Lopez does the same, that really helps them as well. But you want to avoid that second apron at all costs, unless you're going the Suns route, where it's just, we're going to load up a mega team here and we'll deal with those restrictions later. But to me, those two reasons were why I kind of assume that Chris Livingston is going to be a part of the 15-man roster, not as a two-way guy. And I agree as well, not to parrot everything you said, but I did think back to Donte DiVincenzo, and you think about guys that come from these winning programs and blue blood programs as well, in the case of Livingston with Kentucky, but guys that just won in college and played in a pro-style system and in a system that gets you ready for the NBA. That has a big, big importance, at least to me, when filling out your roster. Not to say you only have to key in on that, but to me, for a veteran team that is trying to win and kind of serve two purposes here of winning and building for the future, that's, to me, where I would start for Livingston too. It's basically a lottery ticket, that you know of the skills, you know of how this guy was rated coming out of high school. You know, he got into Kentucky. And look, I don't think it's all hyperbole, but John Calipari, from the moment he left Kentucky to everything in the last couple of weeks to getting ready for the draft, has had some very, very high praise for Chris Livingston and some of the work that he's put in the offseason to get ready for that second level. So to me, those two made sense for those reasons. And then also a guy like Amari Moore, it just seems like Drew Timme may fit in a little more with how the Bucks had rounded out their two ways in the past. But it does seem like there's a different approach with this to the two ways and the players that the Bucks are targeting, where again, we're seeing larger wings and guys that are filling the position that is most important in the NBA. You need a guy that can run the offense, sure, but you need guys that can play on the wing and defend, because that has just taken over this game. So Moore fits that bill. Those are the types of guys, to me, you should use your two ways on and really try to develop. I mean, you think back to what Miami has done, it's within that position, and those are the guys they've done it with. And with Drew Timme, it's just an Exhibit 10, so it's not yet a two-way, and it's basically, hey, we know what the flaws are. if you can improve those, same as what we said before, of playing for a winning program and getting ready for that, experiencing that success. If we can build you up here, then we'll see enough that we can upgrade this to a two-way.
We're not just here for the title for the Milwaukee Bucks. We're here for a title for the Wisconsin Herd as well. So bring on all the talent in the training camp roster you can possibly bring. We had someone comment on YouTube last night that they missed Dante. I missed Dante too. He was a fun player to watch. I know he was maligned, but I always liked him. I thought he was the type of guy that did winning stuff, and then he gets traded, and then all of a sudden everyone loves him because the deal didn't work out. But those are the types of guys, and I know you're talking about a first rounder compared to guys that are in the second round. So the expectations are different for sure, but maybe there are some similarities with the path there and the way they go about it, as we've certainly discussed. We're going to get to Brook Lopez next, so from the draftees to a veteran. But first, we'll talk about the Game Time app, and this is very important for those looking to go to concerts, festivals, definitely sports. Obviously, the Brewers still rolling. I got myself to a couple of Brewers games over the last few days, and buying your tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you will have. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Good for people that don't plan like me. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, and everything in between, as we mentioned. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply there. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And I mentioned that baseball is still rolling on, and that might be of interest to those who are very interested in using Prize Picks, our longtime sponsor of the podcast. If you don't know what Prize Picks is all about, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. NBA and NFL in the offseason, but as I said, you can roll on with MLB, golf as well if you're into that type of thing. Certainly the WNBA, esports there as well. So there's plenty of stuff still going on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app, go to prizepicks.com, sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, they'll give you 100. Deposit 50, you'll get $50 back. Don't forget, enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks. So I was sitting on the couch last night watching the broadcast of the NBA draft, and Woj comes on and starts talking about the Houston Rockets, the Milwaukee Bucks, Brook Lopez, and he just kind of throws out there that the Rockets are one of the teams expected to chase Brook Lopez. Now, I got no idea what the Rockets are doing. They got a bunch of young players, and I don't know when they're planning on being good. Maybe they just want a veteran. They want a big man in there to help guide some of these younger bigs that they've got on the roster. I'm not sure, but the idea of Brook Lopez playing for the Houston Rockets next year doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We've spent so much time talking about Chris Middleton for obvious reasons because the option was coming up. Now we shift to free agency opening in the next week. Did you sit up in your chair when you saw that? I mean, I think we expect that there's going to be teams that are going to at least inquire about the services of Brook Lopez. In my opinion, he's coming off the best year of his career.
Yeah.
Where's the concern level for you on Brook Lopez? Because maybe I've got a false sense of security. I just can't picture the big fella anywhere else other than Milwaukee next year to have another crack at it.
I'm pretty much of the same mindset as you. When I heard that Woj report or little tidbit in the broadcast, it was kind of same reaction of, okay, that's you knew there'd be at least one team that would trickle out of, hey, expect them to aggressively pursue Brook Lopez. I haven't seen the changes since the draft, but because a few teams did have a little bit of flexibility that they created with some of those trades we saw yesterday. But, when you looked at teams that had a decent amount of cap space, as we've touched on, it's not really good teams that are out there. To me, all along, the one that I always kind of wondered of, would it make sense for this team to pursue Brook Lopez was the San Antonio Spurs, knowing Victor Wembanyama is not a center, and you would need some size to play next to your 7'5" ball handling alien. And it seemed like, man, Brook would kind of make a lot of sense there. But it doesn't appear to be the case that they would have any interest. You go through the other teams. Sacramento, I think, was mentioned by a few outlets of, well, they do want some veteran help up there. But we've seen in the past what it looks like when you play Domantas Sabonis next to a traditional center in Indiana. That didn't work. Orlando is already locked into Wendell Carter from that deal with the Bulls. The Bulls have a little bit of space, but they're seemingly going to re-up Vucevic. So there's not a whole lot of teams you would point to of, man, this team makes a lot of sense for Brook Lopez. And I think that's why there's that large assumption by certainly Bucks fans and many others throughout the league of he's probably going to be back there in Milwaukee. When we were talking before this started, I don't think Brook Lopez is departing, but if you told me one of the two guys is gone between him and Chris Middleton, I do think it's more likely that it's Brook Lopez that is leaving and taking an offer elsewhere than Chris. But again, I still think both of them will be there. That's just if you had to choose one. I would assume it would be somebody offering a little more to Brook than the Bucks were willing to pay, or just more that would blow out what the Bucks could do in their mind to retain Brook. So again, it really to me comes down to the teams that have cap space. What's the real fit? And let's center in on Houston here. Frank mentioned this before the offseason, well into the late end of the season, I remember, is that a part of why you really wanted James Harden to go to Houston was not only to kind of laugh at the expense of the 76ers and say, man, so you lost James Harden throughout all of that, but also, as he pointed out then months ago, well, if he signs with Houston, we thought the Rockets could be one of those teams interested in Chris Middleton, and that takes away one of the big suitors for Chris. And it just turns out it may, in fact, be a big suitor for Brook Lopez. So that is part of why I think you're seeing this. But also, if you're Brook, I have a hard time seeing him exiting Milwaukee because of the teams we ran through that have money to throw at him, and at least sizably more money to get him to reconsider what we think the Bucks would be offering. I just don't see a guy who's, let's be honest, probably approaching his last NBA contract. Like, is this where you're going to end your career, playing for a Houston Rockets team that, sure, they say they want to win now, but the pieces they have, it's a young, promising team, but in that Western Conference, they're not going to win well. So is Brook Lopez, long story short, really going to leave a team that has the third best title odds to go to a place where he may be in the play-in tournament, and that's how he wraps up his career?
Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's not something that I feel like I've sensed from Brook Lopez, who is so competitive. We've seen that and loved that over the last few years, but it's what his twin brother's done. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it's.
We've seen he does everything that Robin doesn't do, so that's even more.
I know, and let's hope that it stays that way in this regard. Unless Robin wants to come back and sit and get a roster spot as well, sit on the floor and play some valuable minutes when Brook needs a rest as well. Final thought on this before we wrap this up is just the idea that in 2018-19, the offseason of 2018, when Brook Lopez signed for the Bucks late, it was in August, $3.3 million or somewhere around there with the Bucks. Could you imagine that he would sign that deal? Then he would sign a 4-year 52. And then getting to his mid-30s, having back surgery in that time, and signing a greater per-year money deal. Because I think that's where we're at. You know, he was at the 12 to 13 mark for the last 4 seasons. It feels like it's going to be more than that, wherever it is. Just a remarkable story, and good for Brook Lopez, man. I love that guy.
Best season of his career last year. I agree with you. I'd mentioned that quite a bit during the regular season as well. When you factor in the age, you factor in just how dominant he was defensively, and that he still showed you, hey, when you need me, I maybe not 20 points a game, but I can be pretty close to that guy I was with the Brooklyn Nets. But to do this less than a calendar year removed from back surgery for a 7-footer in his mid-30s, to me is is what's most remarkable about it. And at this point, I don't think there's any disputing. He is the greatest free agent signing in franchise history. When you think about how he's just as instrumental as Bud and Drew Holiday and everybody else in that group to bringing this team a championship.
Yep, he's, regardless of what's happened, he's going to be one of the most loved players in this franchise's history, I would have to imagine, and an incredible story for him. Hopefully, still a couple more years to go here in Milwaukee. That's going to do it for Locked On Bucks this weekend. We'll be back early next week, and this is when we really ramp up towards free agency. So keep it right here. Let us know from today's show any further thoughts on the draftees, what Adrian Griffin is going to do in terms of playing style with his team, and then what your expectations are of Brook Lopez, and maybe how much money you think that man should get per year. I know everyone wants these players to be generous, but this man has earned some bucks. So let us know your thoughts from today's show, and drop a like, a comment, subscribe, and do all those things as well. We really appreciate it. I don't know what I'm doing this weekend, Justin, but I'll be wandering around Summerfest at some point in time. I'm going to get some sun. I don't love country music, but I know that there's plenty on. But there'll be beers, and I'll drink some beers in the sun, and that sounds like a good time to me. So I'm sure we'll catch up at some point. Everyone enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you early next week.